You never really know your neighbors. They smile, wave, maybe even make small talk. But what happens behind closed doors is another story. Some people move in, but something about them feels off. Too quiet, too watchful. And sometimes they aren't new at all. They've been waiting, watching, and by the time you realize it, it's already too late. When my wife Rachel and I moved into our new home, we were excited for a fresh start. The neighborhood was quiet, filled with nice, normal families, or so we thought. The house next door was different. The family that lived there, the Grahams, kept to themselves. They never spoke to anyone. And then there was the boy. The first time I saw him, I was taking out the trash. He was standing in his front yard staring at me. His face was thin and pale, his hollow eyes locked onto mine with an expression I couldn't read. I gave him a small wave. He didn't wave back, didn't blink, just stood there, motionless. I went inside and told Rachel, "I think the kid next door is off," she laughed. "Maybe he's just shy." But over time, it got worse. It started with small things. At first, we'd catch glimpses of him in our yard. Then, we found our back gate open, even though we always locked it. One night while watching TV, Rachel gasped. I turned and saw him standing outside our window, just watching us, not moving, not reacting. I rushed outside, but by the time I got there, he was gone. We tried to ignore it, but the boy kept showing up. Once, Rachel came downstairs to find him standing in our kitchen. He had come in through the back door, which we knew we had locked. She screamed and I ran down, expecting him to run away. But he didn't. He just stood there, silent, expressionless. I tried talking to him. "Hey buddy, you can't be in here. Does your mom know you're here?" No answer. He didn't even acknowledge me. I led him outside and knocked on the Graham's door. No one answered. The lights were off. But I knew they were home. Finally, I gave up and walked the boy back inside their house. As soon as he stepped inside, he turned to me one last time and smiled. It was the first and only emotion I had ever seen on his face. And it wasn't right. The next day, I decided to talk to the Grahams directly. Mr. Graham answered the door, a thin man in his late 50s, his face sunken, his eyes dark and empty. I told him about his son sneaking into our house. He stared at me for a long time before saying, "He's just curious." Then he shut the door in my face. I stood there, my skin crawling. Something about the way he said it, like the boy wasn't his, like he was something else. Rachel and I started locking everything, doors, windows, even the garage. But it didn't stop. One morning, I stepped onto our porch and found a pile of photos. At first, they looked normal. Pictures of our house. Then I looked closer. They were taken from inside, from our bedroom. Rachel started crying. I flipped through them, my hands shaking. And then, at the very bottom, was a photo of us sleeping. That night, I heard something scraping against the glass. I turned and saw him, his face pressed against the sliding door. His breath fogged up the glass. His hands were bloody. I grabbed a baseball bat and threw the door open, ready to chase him off. But he was already gone. That was the final straw. We called the police. When the cops arrived, I told them everything. They went next door and knocked. No answer. But then one officer noticed something off. The house had no lights, no furniture. The windows were covered with newspapers from over a decade ago. No one had lived there in years. I felt sick. "What about the boy?" I asked. The officers exchanged a look. "What boy?" They broke down the door. The inside was worse than I imagined. Rotting furniture, mold creeping up the walls, and a stench so strong I gagged. In the corner, they found a trapdoor leading to the basement, and what they found down there will haunt me forever. The room was filled with boxes and old newspapers, and in the middle, a tiny wooden chair and chains. One officer pulled out a box of old ID cards. I looked over his shoulder, and that's when I saw it. A missing child poster from 12 years ago. The name beneath it sent a cold shock through my body. Elliot Harrison, last seen at age 6. The photo showed a younger version of the boy next door, except he wasn't 6 anymore. And the people who had been keeping him weren't his parents. They found more pictures taken over the years. One thing stood out in all of them. The boy was always silent, never spoke, never smiled. Then one officer found something else. A surgical kit, dried bloodstains, and a small rusted scalpel. I watched in horror as one officer turned pale. They cut out his tongue. Rachel started sobbing. That was why he never spoke. That was why he only stared. He'd been trying to tell us something all along. The police started digging into records. No one named Graham had ever owned that house. There were no recent sales, no documents, no signs of where they went. The house had been empty for years. So where did the Grahams go? Or worse, were they ever real? We moved out 2 weeks later. We never saw the boy again. But sometimes, at night, I wake up to the feeling of being watched. And one time, just before we left, I swore I saw a shadow standing by the window. Not outside. Inside. My grandparents lived in an old apartment building for nearly 30 years. It wasn't in the best neighborhood, but they never wanted to leave. They knew everyone in the building. The families, the elderly couples, even the quiet man who lived alone in 4B. But there was one apartment they never spoke about, the one on the top floor. I was 11 when I first visited them for the summer. My mom had sent me to stay for a few weeks while she worked extra shifts back home. It was uneventful at first. Days spent helping my grandpa with crossword puzzles and watching my grandma cook. Then, one evening, my grandparents got a visitor. A boy, about my age, thin and pale, with deep-set dark eyes. He stood at the door, staring at us. "I live upstairs," he finally said. "Can your grandson come play?" My grandma's face immediately darkened. She didn't yell or push me away, but I felt her grip tighten on my shoulder. "No, sweetie," she said, forcing a smile. "Maybe another time." The boy's expression didn't change. He just turned and walked away, heading toward the top floor. I watched him go, feeling something I couldn't explain, something that made my stomach hurt. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the boy. Something about him felt off. The way his eyes never blinked. How his voice was too soft, too empty. At midnight, I woke up to the sound of footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate footsteps. They weren't going anywhere, just pacing, back and forth, like someone was waiting. The next morning, I asked my grandpa, "Who lives upstairs?" His hand froze over his coffee cup. My grandma shot him a look. "No one," she said quickly. I frowned. "But I saw the boy." "You must have imagined it," she interrupted, forcing a chuckle. "There hasn't been anyone living in that apartment for years." I knew she was lying. That afternoon, I stayed outside playing with my toy cars when I saw him again, standing at the base of the stairwell, watching me. He didn't move, didn't smile. Then after a long silence, he said, "Come upstairs. just for a little bit. I hesitated. I wasn't scared of him exactly. But my grandmother's reaction the night before still sat heavy in my mind. I can't. His dark eyes flickered. You should. Then, without another word, he turned and walked back upstairs. That night, the footsteps returned. But this time, they didn't stay above me. I heard them coming down. Software, slow, one step at a time. Then they stopped. Right outside my door. The doorknob rattled. I held my breath. A long silence followed. Then, a whisper. Come upstairs. The next morning, I told my grandma what happened. She was visibly shaken, her hands trembling as she scrubbed the kitchen counter. Finally, she sat me down and said, "Listen to me. Never go upstairs. Ever." Her voice was firm, her expression deadly serious. I nodded, and I meant it. But later that day, he came back. He appeared at the door while my grandma was out getting groceries. I hesitated before opening it. Just a crack. He was closer this time, almost too close, his face inches from the gap in the door. "Come upstairs," he repeated. "I want to show you something." Something inside me itched to go, like I needed to, like something was pulling me toward him. But then, I heard footsteps behind me. My grandpa had come into the room. The second he saw the boy, he slammed the door shut, bolted the lock, and muttered something under his breath. A prayer. That was the last time I saw him. That summer ended, and I went home. Years passed. I barely thought about that boy. But the older I got, the more I realized how strange it all was. When I was 19, I asked my grandma about it. She hesitated before finally sighing. And then she told me. Decades ago, a couple on the top floor had a son. A quiet, strange boy who never had friends, who rarely spoke. Then one night, he vanished. The parents claimed he ran away, but no one in the building believed them. The police investigated, but never found a body. And then, after weeks of questioning, the parents packed up and disappeared. The apartment was left empty. No one ever moved in again. But strange things started happening. Children would see a boy who wasn't there. Neighbors would hear footsteps pacing upstairs, even when the apartment was vacant. And every few years, a new child would go missing. I felt my stomach drop. Did they ever find out what happened to him? I asked. My grandma hesitated. Then in a soft whisper, she said, "The police found something hidden in the walls of the apartment." I swallowed. "What?" She exhaled, shaking her head. "A child's skeleton, tongue removed, hands bound." The air felt thick. "He never left." My skin crawled. "So, the boy I saw?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to, because I already knew. He wanted me to come upstairs, so he wouldn't be alone, just like the others. When the house next door finally sold, we were relieved. It had sat empty for years, becoming an eyesore in our otherwise quiet neighborhood. The new neighbor, Mr. Langley, moved in on a Sunday afternoon. I remember watching him through the kitchen window as he unloaded his things. He was thin, older, probably in his late 50s, with graying hair and a permanent half-smile on his face. Something about him felt off. I should have trusted that feeling. The first incident happened within a week. My wife, Emily, found a small box on our porch one morning. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet. No note, no explanation. Confused, she asked if I had gotten it for her. I hadn't. That evening, as I took out the trash, I noticed Mr. Langley sitting on his porch. rocking in an old wooden chair. His eyes never left me. I hesitated before calling out, "Hey, do you know anything about a package left on our porch?" His smile widened, but he said nothing. Then, just as I was about to turn away, he murmured, "Looks beautiful on her wrist." I didn't know what to say. I just went inside and locked the door. The gifts kept coming. A box of chocolates. A framed photo of our family. One we never gave him. Once a single red rose was left on my wife's windshield. It wasn't just the gifts, though. We started seeing him everywhere. At the grocery store, even though he didn't seem to be buying anything. At the park, sitting alone on a bench, watching our kids play. The worst was when Emily picked up our son from school and saw Langley standing near the playground just outside the fence. He waved at her like they were old friends. That night, I was furious. I marched over to his house and banged on his door. I could hear movement inside, but he didn't answer. After a minute, I turned to leave, only to find him standing at the edge of my driveway, watching me. His smile was gone. "Mr. Langley," I started, keeping my voice even, "you need to stop leaving things for my wife, and you sure as hell need to stop showing up at my kid's school." His head tilted slightly. "I'm just being neighborly." I took a step forward. "If I see you near my family again, I'll call the police." That was when he whispered, "She used to like my gifts." A chill ran down my spine. "What?" He didn't answer. He just turned and walked back into his house, shutting the door behind him. That night, as Emily and I sat in the living room, trying to make sense of everything, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. At first, no one spoke. Then, in a soft, wheezing voice, I heard, "She used to like my gifts." I hung up immediately and called the police. They sent a patrol car to check on him, but when they knocked on his door, there was no response. They told me to call again if anything else happened. I barely slept that night. The next morning, my wife took the kids to school while I stayed behind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I went outside and stood near Langley's house, peering through the curtains of his living room window. The place was empty, not just quiet, vacant. The furniture was covered in sheets, as if no one had lived there for years. A terrible thought crossed my mind. I tried the front door. It was unlocked. Inside, the air was thick with dust, and something rotten. I stepped cautiously through the hallway, my heart pounding. That was when I saw the stairs leading to the basement. The door at the bottom was slightly open, and there was light coming from inside. I took slow, careful steps down. The basement was cluttered with boxes, old furniture, and stacks of newspapers. And then, on the far wall, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. A shrine. Photos of my wife, Emily. Some from our wedding, some from years ago, even some taken recently. My stomach twisted. How did he have these? Then I saw the newspaper clippings pinned next to the photos, and I finally understood. One of the articles was 20 years old. It showed a younger version of Emily, back when she was in college. The headline read, "Local woman stalker disappears after arson incident, remains never found." I read the article twice before my brain processed it. Years ago, Emily had a stalker, a man who became obsessed with her. She had a restraining order, but then his house burned down with him inside. His body was never recovered. His name was Gregory Langley. I felt a sharp cold rush through me. Langley wasn't a new neighbor. He was the same man, and he had come back. I raced up the stairs, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. But as I reached the front door, there was a soft knock behind me. Not on the door, on the window. Slowly, I turned. Langley stood outside. His face was burned beyond recognition, patches of blackened skin peeling away, revealing muscle and bone. And yet, he was still smiling. I didn't wait. I ran out the back, nearly tripping over myself as I fled toward my house. Behind me, I heard him whisper, just loud enough to carry through the air. She used to like my gifts. That was the last time I saw him. The police searched his house, but it was completely abandoned. No furniture, no shrine, just dust and silence. There were no records of anyone purchasing the property. As far as anyone knew, the house had been vacant for decades, but we knew better. Emily barely spoke about it afterward. But sometimes, at night, I catch her staring at the window, her hands trembling, like she's waiting, like she knows he'll be back.